Hi, and welcome to the Apprentago podcast. My name's Haider, and I'm joined today by my co-host.
And I'm Carlo, and in today's episode, we're going to talk about what it really means to be an apprentice in today's world, which is quite challenging. And we've got a lot of questions that we're going to ask each other because you guys really need to know what it's really like to be a young professional, especially in London. I mean, he's from Derby, so he doesn't really understand what it's like to be in London. Right, yeah, they ride sheep and drive Vauxhalls. Right, yeah, but in London, like it's different game. But yeah, go on, go on.
I wouldn't go that far. But anyway, so I feel like you can learn a lot about why someone chose to do an apprenticeship, particularly from their school experience. So take me back to young Carlo. What were you doing around, 13 to 16? What was life like for you?
Well, it's quite the tale. It was many moons ago now, but all I will say is I didn't actually go to school. Now, you might be thinking, hang on a minute, you didn't go to school. No. So, from the age of 12 to 16, I was homeschooled. And that was mainly because I just didn't have a great experience at school. I have autism at the time, it was diagnosed as Asperger's syndrome, and I just never really got a lot of support. My mother, bless her soul, basically just homeschooled me and thought, right, I'm going to educate my son. So, for the ages of 13 to 16, going back to your question, I just didn't really do a lot of schooling, but what I did do is I taught myself the program. I learned basic business skills. I traded on video games and lots of things, and it was pretty mad. But when it was actually the time of being 16, sitting my GCSEs, uh, unfortunately, me and my mother got made homeless, and it was quite a mad time, which was good because I was like, yes, I don't have to sit them. But then I was like, oh, I don't have no qualifications, which I ended up solving in the end because I'm a degree apprentice, hence I wouldn't be on this podcast. It kind of defeats the point. It's like the shoe salesman who doesn't wear sandals. It's kind of like that gist. So yeah, I'm a degree apprentice for NatWest Markets. Markets makes it sound nicer. So I'm a software developer, or trying to be one. And yeah, I work with traders on the applications they use, bonds, swaps, futures, you name it. I know all about it. I'm like Jordan Belfort, but British.
So what motivated you to want to even do that apprenticeship in the first place? I guess going from 16, where you had no GCSEs at the time,
Yeah.
describe a little bit about the journey from that point where you had so much going on in your personal life in terms of being homeless, not really seeing school as a priority, understandably, because of everything that was happening around you. So how did you pick yourself up from having zero qualifications to getting to a position where you are able to thrive as a degree apprentice today?
I'm I'm gonna say it was a lot of luck and a lot of hard work, and I am not gonna discredit myself by saying it was all luck, because I did work hard. Basically, what I learned is that, unfortunately slash fortunately, the way education is at the moment, you do need your basic GCSE qualifications. And at the time, that petrified me dearly because I was isolated for a few years, just basically being by myself. I was all in my happy little world, just being very, very autistic at the time. And it was when we was homeless that I found out that I could do a level one qualification. A level one qualification is basically a preliminary to a GCSE qualification, which is classed as level two. So yeah, went to college, Epping Forest. Some of you guys might know it. Some of you guys might be watching me who are in that college and might see my face there. Poor sods seeing that every day. I have to look at it in the mirror, and even the mirror cracks up. Not laughing as in the glass, but nevertheless, I sat those, and long story short, after 4 years of being at college, failing my GCSEs 3 times, I passed English first time, I just failed maths 3 times, but now I'm in the position I work in with numbers and traders. I'm going to America in October with my job. Is just a lot of hard work. I had to study, and I didn't like studying because I'm very pattern recognition, and that's part of the autism. Is that you see patterns, you recognize them, and it's really difficult. And it's the same with programming. You can't use it in programming either, and that's why I enjoy it. But no, that's not enough about me for now. Believe it or not, the gentleman sitting next to me, or you might be listening to that and you might think, okay, no one is sitting next to me, Carlo. Has the story himself. So I've got to ask you, Haider, what was you doing from 13 to 16 years old?
God, so for me, like secondary school was such an interesting time. It's probably the understatement of the century. So I think getting into secondary school was my first taste of realizing that the world's not fair. Because based on my postcode, I wasn't able to go to any of the schools I wanted to. So I was placed into what was an Ofsted Special Measures school at the time. And you didn't want to be there, basically. The school was failing. We had like 7 different head teachers in the 5 years that we were there, sorry. It was just chaos. It was very disruptive. There was no like consistency. Performance was like really, really bad at this school. Like in terms of if you'd come out of there and passed your GCSEs, you'd done incredibly well for yourself. So to be in that environment was a big culture shock for me because I'd come from a very multicultural primary school, and then I was suddenly like the only Asian and like Muslim student in my school. And not literally all my friends went to a completely different school to me. So it was literally like me and 2 or 3 other people who I wasn't very close with in that sense. I was the only guy out of that cohort as well. So it was quite an isolating experience going from a place where you're quite happy and you were thriving in sort of primary school to be chucked straight into the deep end, complete culture shock. And in terms of the school as well, a very challenging environment to try and navigate. So yeah, for me, secondary school was definitely hard, I would say, in the sense that there were points where I didn't really want to be there. There were points where I thought I just want to move to a better school. And the only thing that really kept me going, I think, was the fact that, okay, if I work incredibly hard, GCSEs are kind of like my golden ticket out of there because I felt that, doing A levels at sixth form would mean that, okay, I'd be judged on my merit as opposed to just like where I lived and what my postcode was.
That's a very optimistic view. Very optimistic view. And you know what? I respect that. And you know I respect that because we've spoke about it before and everyone loves an underdog story because at the end of the day, right, your unfair advantage was knowing what you had to do. Sometimes in life you think, oh, unfair advantage could mean like what I've had to go through. Yes, but it also could mean that you're aware of your situation. That's where the law of attraction and things like that playing, where if you could manifest something, not that it will actually happen, but if you could picture the top of the mountain, then you know that you can actually go up there. Whether you walk, skydive onto it, there's all different ways. I prefer to skydive onto mountains because it's easier, because that way I don't have to actually go up it. But getting down, it's the problem. So that's where I get stuck. But no, it's a good origin story of where you came from, and unfortunately that's where luck of the draw plays in. Certain areas you're born into are unfortunately categorized in some ways by schools, and
Mhm.
I think we all can agree that's not very fair because I think that a child's potential is completely unique to themselves and it shouldn't be based on a set criteria because at the end of the day we're all human and we all bleed the same colour and breathe the same air, and that's one of my favourite sayings because I believe in one love and one people.
Yeah, I think I completely echo what you're saying in the sense that obviously I'd realize, okay, this situation doesn't seem very fair, but I was just focused on visualizing what's going to be that sort of tip of the mountain, what's going to get me out of the situation where life will get a bit fairer, even though it doesn't seem like it is now. And lots of people around me, in terms of my environment, subconsciously, the message I was getting from my environment was that, like there's no need to try too hard. Like people like us don't do well. Statistically, all the stats were against me. In terms of our predicted grades in school, they used a system where it would predict based on your sort of postcode, your gender, your data, but all these random factors. And basically, on all my school reports, I was only ever predicted D's and C's. And again, that to me didn't make sense. It didn't seem fair. So I always had this very ambitious mindset of I'm going to leave this place with A's and A stars. I don't care if no one's ever done it. I don't care if literally everyone in my year is failing. I'm going to do what I can and just spend all the hours in my free time to try and make sure I get those grades so that I can get my golden ticket and go to a school that, has a much better environment and people are thinking the way I am. So from going like being predicted D's and C's, I was actually able to be like the anomaly in that environment where I left school with A's and A stars. And I remember vividly on results day going in and there being like a news reporter waiting for me to open my results because clearly they had a tip off that I'd done well. And from a news perspective, it was just like like a headline story in the local area, in the sense that no one from the school does well. If anything, the school is known for the complete opposite of, you know, success. I mean, like, without getting into detail, we're talking like teachers being barred from the profession for life. We're talking, you know, like, just petty crime and just all sort, like, just chaos. It was just chaotic. Like, the best way to describe it is probably like, think about like Waterloo Road or like Ackley Bridge, like that kind of vibe, except it wasn't a show. It was like my actual life, and I wasn't getting paid a penny to be part of the show. And I was just like, what, like, am I in a circus or something? Like, I genuinely did not understand like why people weren't switched on or wanting to learn. But I think that's where my personal upbringing came in. Like, despite the fact that my environment at school wasn't positive, my home environment was always very strong, and my parents always prioritized education. And for me, I think education starts at home. So irrespective of the environment I was in school, I was determined to prove people wrong and make it out of there. And I got the grades I wanted, and thankfully I was able to go to a better sixth form. And yeah, touching on that sort of educational element of building up to an apprenticeship. So when I was in sixth form, then I did A levels, and again I felt like the underdog, because everyone, because this school was literally the next school along, but it attracted all the kind of
It was
affluent kids.
like Waterloo Road, but you go up and it turns into EastEnders. So it's like higher production, more drama, right? Yeah, but a better paycheck. So it's all right.
So it was a much better school, much positive environment. And again, I just saw the divide, because the only thing that really changed was the postcode. So I clearly saw like you could drive 10 minutes down the road and the environment's completely different. And I think naturally you have a bit of a filter from GCSEs to A levels as well, of like people who actually want to learn versus people who were just sort of forced to do school, like, even if they didn't really want to be there. So yeah, for me, that was like a massive, another culture shock, going from a school that kind of just felt like a circus and there was just chaos all the time, but still managing to do my bit and get the grades I wanted, and then go to a sixth form where I felt like I sort of fit in a lot more. I had friends who thought like me, and it was just a nicer environment to be in, basically, which is where I started thinking about my next steps in terms of, well, at the time, university, because let's face it, everyone, especially if you're an academic student, it's like, you need to go to university. Why would
Yeah.
you not, right? Even yourself, Carlo, like you did like an IT BTEC, and you got the
Yeah.
equivalent of like 3 A stars, right?
Which again, like I still can't comprehend that I got 3 A stars, but I failed my maths 3 times. That's really weird, and I can't comprehend that. And I look at my qualification and I'm like, I know I've earned this, but you feel imposter syndrome. And I think imposter syndrome is something that people who are neurodiverse feel a lot. I think especially people who are neurodiverse and get into the workplace, because we have a lot of societal pressures on us that I believe majority of that time we've created ourselves. Because, you know, Einstein said insanity and intelligence lead down the path to madness. And it does. And, you know, being highly intelligent, which I believe I am, we can debate that. That can be a big debate in the comments. So I think I'm going to have loads of people sticking up for me. But nevertheless, yeah, I done my BTEC in IT, taught me some basic computing things, taught me some business stuff. I ended up winning Student of the Year award, which, you know what, I didn't deserve to win that. And I only won that, not because I was a good student, because I was a good person. Because in COVID, when everything happened, unfortunately, my tutor at the time, him and his wife, felt quite unwell. And while the Zoom classes were going on, he had to drop out at times, which is completely fair enough. It's, you know, it's the man's wife. And I really put myself in front of the class, as I was the highest achieving student. Epping Forest College wasn't the most glamorous college in the world. And I was like, right, come on, guys, we're all at home. How can we make this better? Do any of us really want to be sat on Zoom and rather be in a classroom? No. Does it sound fun in the first week? Yes. Does it get boring or repetitive and can lead signs into mental decline? Yes. So what can we do? We work as a collective, and through doing that, I helped people actually pass who weren't going to, because they were just digressing and really, really struggling mentally with COVID from home. And you know what? These are people who are 17, 18 years old and are quite more mentally matured than, say, a 15, 16-year-old. And I really felt for them at the time. Because your GCSEs, you know, the benefit of A levels is that you've been through GCSEs, so you understand the stress of an exam. But having all these things predicted for you and having fate not in your control, when, let's be real, right? One of the very few things you have control over is how you perform in that exam. Whether we like them or not, how you perform is basically how your outcome is. and having the predicted grade system come into play really, really threw some people under the bus. And that's why I was like, right, I've got to help the people in my class. Did I even know what they looked like? Yes, of course I did. But I didn't see their face for 5 months. No one had their camera on, right? So you would think, oh my God, is that Bob or is that John talking? No, it was Steve. So it never worked out. And going back to you, Hader, like how you went into the sixth form up the road and everything, like you obviously started and finished before COVID.
Yeah.
But like one thing I will have to ask, and it's jumping ahead a bit, like how did COVID affect you as a degree apprentice? Bearing in mind, I joined the bank. I worked for NatWest at the end of COVID, so like late 2021, just off the back end of it. But how did you find that? Because a lot of people aren't talking about what it was like working in COVID as a young professional.
Yeah, so I'll come back to the sixth form element, but jumping to the COVID point, definitely it was a really challenging point, especially as an apprentice, trying to stay on top of, because let's face it, you're taking on more responsibilities as a young professional, as an apprentice anyway. You're studying, you're working, you're juggling like a social life, you're doing all these other things. And then on top of that, there's like a whole global pandemic, which feels like the biggest spanner in the works.
Mm.
And again, because I was in the exam mode, because I was doing exams on my apprenticeship, it felt like it was just so much harder to make progress
Mm.
because you're having to carry on as normal, but there's like a massive elephant in the room that's obviously going to prevent you from doing that. So yeah, definitely in terms of like mental health, it was a very tough time I found. But again, I just tried to focus on what I could control, and
Mm.
thankfully because I wasn't, I still had the control to do my exams and things like that and
Mm.
revise. It didn't feel like that thing was taken away from me. But I really empathize with students who obviously felt, that they
Mm.
felt kind of the system failed them in the sense with the predicted grades, and a lot of students had to retake. But yeah, going back to sixth form, so when I was in sixth form I did so for A levels I did maths, business.
Four. You done four A levels, yeah?
That wasn't
Right.
the plan, by the way.
Four.
That wasn't the
Carry
plan,
on.
by the way. So I did maths, economics, business, and biology. The plan was to drop biology because obviously it was the odd one out in terms of like career and stuff.
Hmm.
But I was annoyingly better at it than economics, probably because economics was like a very new subject to me. So I kept four to drop one, but then I got so far into year 13 doing four, I just figured even if like I've basically learned everything now, I may as well just sit all four now. So yeah, I never went in to like with the intent to do four, but I just got to a point where I was like, it feels doable. Probably because business and economics felt quite interlinked, so I didn't feel like I was doing four like distinctly separate subjects. There's a bit of overlap, so to me it kind of felt like three and a half, so it wasn't too bad. But yeah, because I'd come in with like A's and A stars at GCSE, and I was obviously predicted A's and A stars at A level based off that, naturally I was going to be the
Mm.
Oxbridge kid, like in terms of my head of sixth form's eyes, like why are you not thinking of Oxford or Cambridge? And whilst university was in my head like the default route, I actually found out about apprenticeships in year 12. I went to like a
Mm.
careers fair and there was like all these university stalls, and then there was just like companies there, and I was just a bit confused as to why they were there. So I just went round, just to get a free pen or whatever, just entertain a conversation, find out why they're here, and just do a bit of networking. And it was like, oh, so there's this thing called apprenticeships apparently. And because I was interested in accounting and finance at the
Mm.
time, there was an accounting firm there who basically said, yeah, you can do an apprenticeship in accounting to become a qualified accountant. And like to me, that was mind blowing because I thought you had to do a degree in the subject that you want to like become qualified in. So I thought to become an accountant, you needed an accounting degree.
Mm.
Quickly realized that wasn't the case. And then I realized you don't even need a degree, like full stop. And I was like, oh, then why am I going to university kind of thing? And then when I looked into the option, it seemed like a no-brainer. You were getting paid a salary, you were getting work experience, and you were qualifying much quicker. And if anything, I felt like there was a catch. It felt like almost like a scam because no one was doing it. And I'm like, why though? It sounds almost too good to be true.
I'm gonna have to. I'm gonna have to add to that point the feeling of a scam. I feel that with degree apprenticeships, they can come across like the most scammy thing. It's like someone selling you an iPhone 4 when you're 12 years old scrolling the web. It's like iPhone 4, you have one, click now. But you actually get the iPhone. Like and that's the mad thing. Like you say to someone, right, oh, you can get a job of 25K. Bearing in mind, right, that's what you start at. You work with professionals who are a master of their craft, right? And on top of that, you get a free university degree that is as recognised as any other degree. Now, yes, some are Russell Group, some are not, but I do believe it's the experience that sets you apart. a famous debate that we have had between ourselves, which is one of the reasons we wanted to start this podcast, is what's better, doing 4 years at Oxbridge, which is Cambridge and Oxford for those who aren't aware, and would you rather do 4 years at Google with doing the same degree, could be computer science, but at a university not as well known? And we both have mixed opinions on that. And you might think, hang on, mixed opinions, but you're both degree apprentices, so you would actually go to uni. Well, not necessarily, but we'll get into that later. And the main reason I wanted to put that there is this podcast isn't just about our stories, the people we're going to have on we are fully booked. We are like a busy fish and chips shop on a Friday night. We have got them queuing down the road, all different types of people, from chocolate apprentices, people at Louis Vuitton. Louis Vuitton, and they do get free products before you ask, right? He's been at Rolls-Royce, I'm at NatWest. We don't talk about banks that much here because it gets to a point where everyone thinks I'm evil because I'm a banker, but I'm not a banker. I just sit by their side and they do the good work and I get a little smile for it.
So yeah, I guess going back to the decision point of university versus an apprenticeship. So I found out about this apprenticeship route, and because it felt like a scam, like you said, it literally just felt too good to be true. I'm like, surely everyone should be doing this. Whereas at the time, it felt like no one was. I'd never come across an apprentice. I had the very stereotypical view of an apprentice. I thought it was just mainly for people who want to do very hands-on jobs and maybe like just work in garages. It was that kind of stereotype of just being a mechanic or something. So when I found out that, oh no, it's for, professional industries as well, and industries where typically you would need a degree to get into, I thought, okay, this is very different to what I had in my mind. But I didn't have any role models at the time. So this is going back to 2017 when I was doing my A-level. So degree apprenticeships hadn't really taken off then. There were a few out and about, but really it was still a very, very new thing. So I think that with any new thing, people tend to be a bit kind of scared with what it's going to look like on the other side. So usually just go for the tried and tested route. So yeah, then I thought, okay, what's the safest thing I can do? I'll apply to both. So my plan in my head, it was like, my plan A is an apprenticeship because it sounds so good, and my plan B is university. But my teachers seemed to think it was the other way around. But I thought, okay, let them think that, because let's face it, teachers are on your case. Do your UCAS personal statement, do this, do that. And I felt like I was just going through the motions to keep them happy. So I did apply to university. So I got all 5 of my uni offers. So I applied for management science at LSE, UCL, Leeds, Loughborough and Warwick. So I got all 5 of my offers, which I was really grateful for, especially LSE and UCL, because I wasn't London based, and to me it seemed like a bit of a moonshot, just kind of stab in the dark, see if they even give me a space, and they did. And that was like a big thing for me, because like in my like neighborhood, no one had ever got into those types of institutions. So to be able to say I even got an offer was like a big achievement for me. But at the same time, it was bittersweet, because deep down I knew I didn't really want to go there. But everyone seemed to like want to push me down that route, because they felt that that was like what it is to be successful. Like, you need a degree, especially like within the Asian community. A degree is seen like almost like a status symbol, as much as it is like a in terms of like an entry point into a job. Like, just having a degree, like irrespective of whether you get a job or not, seems to be valuable, which I can never quite wrap my head around. Surely, like, you need to get utility out of that degree. You need to use it or apply it for it to be valuable, right?
I think that's also where a degree apprenticeship can come in, because at the end of the day, right, some people are not suited for traditional education. It's a proven fact. Some people are great at sales but might have bad handwriting, so therefore they're not great at writing. Doesn't mean they're a bad person, or they're, not as smart as the next guy or girl. It's just more of your capabilities of what you can do. And the beauty of a degree apprenticeship is, your degree's paid for, your stress is done. You can get help from people who have done a similar degree. And even if you are like me and getting a 2-1 in your degree as it stands, and can't get a first because, of time, or you just haven't got the mindset for it, that's okay, because at the end of the day, you've got them 4 years of real world practical experience that someone your age wouldn't have. And a lot of teachers, like I can tell you now that in college, degree apprenticeships weren't a thing. Like, of course, you had certain apprenticeships, like Facebook done one, Google done one at a level 3. You do a qualification, but you never really knew what happened after. And that was a massive worry for a lot of people. Whereas with university, you think, well, I can get a job after, and you can do that, which isn't true for all people. 15% of undergrads who complete their degree are left in unemployment. Doesn't tell you exactly what degree they do. Doesn't mean I believe every degree is valuable. It teaches you something. You shouldn't be put down for what you study, because at the end of the day, that's your choice, and no one should be able to take that away from you.
Mhm.
Mm.
Yeah, so I agree. No one really talked about apprenticeships in school again because I
Mm.
think it's because no one really saw the path that it would kind of look like in terms of if you did go down that route. There wasn't enough case studies, enough role models to talk about their experiences.
Mm.
Whereas university, there's plenty of case studies of people who were, in high earning jobs because they'd done a degree from a university in terms of the traditional route. So yeah, it felt like a risk. So I got my uni offers. I was applying to apprenticeships at the same time, and to me, because I was very academic, and let's face it, with university, they just care about your grades mainly, in the sense of if you've got A's and A stars, you will get into a good university. You just need a decent personal statement to get you there, which your school gives you a lot of support with. Whereas on the flip side, you get no support really with apprenticeship applications, and you have to figure out everything for yourself, which is where I really struggled because I thought applying to an apprenticeship would be like university. I thought it'd be straightforward. Okay, I apply to 5 unis, I'll apply for 5 apprenticeships, I'll get, like, 5 offers on each side, and then I'll take my pick. Wrong. That is not the case at all. You are applying for a competitive job. That's the way you need to think about applying for an apprenticeship. You are applying for a top job at 17, 18, however old you are, going through the process. So it's nothing like applying to university in that sense. Yes, you get a degree off the back of it, but in terms of the application angle, it's completely different. So it's a lot more cutthroat, and I got rejection after rejection after rejection, and I was like really shaken up because
Mm.
in school having A's and A stars is like that's all that's valued, and suddenly a company saying no, we don't really care about
No,
just the
it's not good
grades. It's not
enough.
good enough, exactly.
Not
So
good enough.
that really was like a knock in terms of confidence, but more so because I didn't know what to do. Like, I wouldn't mind if they didn't care about the grades, but I knew what to do. I realized they didn't care about the grades, and I didn't know what to do
And I
about
feel
it.
like it's hard because you're not really taught how to apply through a job, let alone an apprenticeship. You would
Mm,
think that within our educational system that, and not just a degree apprenticeship, but any apprenticeship is going to be like, well, this is how you apply for UCAS. This is how you can apply for an apprenticeship. Now, playing devil's advocate here, not every company is going to, or institution is going to have the same application process. They're not. But standardization does exist. If you compare the 1,000 companies, I'm sure they have a similar form they fill out and a similar kind of test they do. And that's another thing. When you apply for an apprenticeship, before you even can submit your application, you have to do a test. So with universities, unless you're going to go do a medical degree, you don't have to sit any preliminary exams or tests, which is a really, really big shocker, because I know you said that before, that the tests were really hard.
yeah, it was, again, because I didn't know how to
Yeah.
prepare for them. For example, it's like doing an A level with like no revision. Of course,
Mm.
you're going to fail. Like, or it's going to be very hard to pass something you don't understand. Surely you need to know how to, revise it or even approach it. And that's what I felt. I felt like I was going in blind with all my apprenticeship applications, doing them, failing, asking teachers for help, and they're kind of like, we don't really know. Every company has their own process, and like my business and economics teachers were really supportive because I feel like they were the two teachers that actually gave
Mm.
me balanced advice because they both worked in industry and had jobs in industry prior to teaching. So they weren't biased towards traditional academia. They had degrees, but they were very open-minded, and they were probably the only two teachers that
Mm.
actually entertained the conversation about me wanting to do an apprenticeship despite having A's and A stars, right? Whereas I felt like other teachers, it was more of a case of no, like, you're stupid for even considering that. You definitely need to be going to like Oxford
Mm.
or Cambridge or a top Russell Group university. And not to say there's anything wrong with that, and that I wouldn't have like done well going down that route either. But to me, it was about the individual. I just felt like everyone's got their own journey and they're going to have different goals. And for me, it was about something that would alleviate like the financial pressure and burden of like student debt. I didn't really want that hanging over my head if I could avoid it. And I saw the struggle of, people still not being able to land jobs with degrees, and I felt like the practical
Mm.
experience was, it made sense. So I got rejected, and again, I was not expecting those rejections. And because I was at London based, quite frankly, I didn't have a lot of choice with regards
Mm.
to which companies I could apply to. Because again, the cost of like moving to London, even just the thought of it in terms of like, let's talk about it from a honest perspective, like fear and anxiety. Because you're like 17, 18, and then the thought of going to like a capital city where you know nobody and having to like fend for yourself while working for a job. Like it was just too much. So to me, I was like, the apprenticeship sounds great, but I do need to, I do want to stay at home or live locally so that, you know, it's not too stressful at, you know, such a young age. So I, you know, had like a radius in terms of where I was looking, predominantly in the Midlands. So I applied for companies according to that criteria. But because I was clueless, I was just getting rejected. A lot of them were sort of accounting related apprenticeships, which is what I wanted to get into. And then I actually found out about the apprenticeship I got onto. Again, it felt like luck because in my head, to do an accounting apprenticeship, you'd have to do it at an accounting firm because again, when you're younger, you just associate like the type of apprenticeship with the industry. You
Mm.
think, okay, tech apprenticeship at a tech company, engineering apprenticeship at an engineering company. You don't really think that, you know, you need other there's other roles within the business as well. So I actually had an assembly delivered at my sixth form by Rolls-Royce, who were talking about the apprenticeships they had on offer. And again, like I just associated Rolls-Royce with, okay, let's face it, you think of cars first, but they don't actually make the cars. That's owned by
And
BMW.
you pointed that out to me because I was like, "Oh my god, you worked at Rolls-Royce." I think it's like "Oh my god, you're Mr. Beast." I was like, "Oh, what Rolls-Royce have you driven?" And it's like,
That
"I haven't," and I'm like, "What?"
yeah, because everyone associates the brand with the cars,
Mm.
but they actually sold that a long time ago. So BMW, right, Rolls-Royce Motors, as in the car brand, is a separate entity owned by BMW Group, but the Rolls-Royce PLC, the company, is mainly aerospace engineering that it's known for. So you've got like an aerospace engineering company coming into your school. You're going to think it's just about engineering apprenticeships. They're talking about their apprenticeships they've got, and I thought I don't want to be an engineer, so this is not interesting to me. And they were going through their schemes and they said, listen, we've got other opportunities outside of engineering as well. And there was a finance one which ticked all the boxes for me. It had like the qualification I was after. It had and it was in industry as well because I like business. I actually liked the idea of working for a non-accounting
Mm.
company because you got exposure to a different industry, but you still had that touch of finance. So that was my last shot, basically, because I couldn't find anything else local to me, and that happened to be in the same city I was in Derby. So I applied for that apprenticeship, not thinking much of it because I'd been rejected by every other company. I just figured it would be another no. I got tired of seeing unfortunately, you know, your application has been unsuccessful,
They
and
love saying "unfortunately." Any mail or letter you get and it says "unfortunately," you just know you might as well just rip it up, and put it in the bin.
So I did the test and I was expecting another unfortunately. And I passed the test and I was like, oh, this is promising. Because the thing that was frustrating for me is that I just wanted to speak to someone face to face. It was annoying failing before someone had even spoken to you. It just felt
Mm.
like it was just like, computer says no, sorry. It's like, it was just annoying because it's like, well, if I spoke to an actual human, I'd probably get given a chance. So that was like a frustration I had with applying for apprenticeships. But having got that green tick to actually get through to like an assessment center where I had like an interview and a group activity and all that kind of stuff, it was like, okay, I can actually shine now because I'm getting a chance to show my personality. So all my eggs went in that one basket. I prepared so much. It was literally like the first proper interview I was doing because I wasn't working during sixth
Mm.
form, so I never really had a full-time job or part-time job like prior to that. And yeah, I did work experience here and there, but this was like a proper interview, and I was like, okay, there's a lot of pressure riding on this. It was scary. I'm
Mm.
not gonna lie. I was just frantically googling stuff because again, it boils down to network. If you've got people in the right companies, they can kind of give you all the tips and tricks and the blueprint in terms of like, say this, don't say that. But when you're navigating that yourself, because I'm the eldest of six actually, so going through like the whole British education system for the first time, and then the apprenticeship system was just like, God, I just felt like a guinea pig, like just jumping through all these hoops and hurdles and just crashing and burning and sometimes succeeding. So it was like, okay, I'm just gonna have to try my best and just just pray like something works out. So I did it. I got made so I was in their reserve pool. So I didn't get rejected. Quite a few people got rejected after their assessment centers, but because it was so competitive, there was only a few people who got conditional offers straight away, and they were still
Mm.
interviewing a lot of other candidates. So I was basically in their like maybe pile, let's call it, and I was a backup. So again, it wasn't reassuring knowing that okay, this apprenticeship route is not looking likely. To be honest, I thought
Mm.
Rolls-Royce are gonna pick some smart people. They're gonna get the grades, and realistically, I need to start thinking of other options. So I'd basically decided that, okay, I'm going to take a gap year then, that I didn't plan to take on results days. Because quite frankly, I'd run out of apprenticeship options, but I really didn't want to go to uni. So fast forward to results day, A-level exams were brutal. Like A-levels are hard, man. Very, very hard and stressful. And we were the guinea pig year again, going back to being a guinea pig that did the new A-level system. So we were the first year that was doing the A-levels where all your grade was resting on the final year, as opposed to it being like 50% from year 12 and then 50% from year 13 and averaging out. So we had no past papers, we had no like prep. Teachers were sort of winging it because they had never taught the new syllabus before. So like everything about it just felt like experimental. My A-levels were new. Like I'm trying to apply for this new thing that's like, you know, degree level apprenticeship. Like everything was just up in the air. It was such a like anxious time for me as like a teenager. It's just so stressful because you have so many things going on in your head. Like, what do I want to do when I'm older? Will I even get the grades? Like, what do I want to do in my life? Will I be able to get to? Like, it's such a stressful time, and I really empathize with like young people going through that because it's not easy at all. And so yeah, fast forward to results day, I got my dream grades. Like again, I'd come in as the underdog, and I wanted to prove that just because I went to a really rubbish secondary school doesn't mean I can't work twice as hard to, you know, potentially beat kids who went to like grammar schools or private schools. So I actually got all A's and A stars, and to me that was like a dream come true because again I just visualized and worked so hard in my spare time to make sure that I could turn that sort of dream into a reality. And but it was also bittersweet because on results day I got my uni offers, but I didn't want to go, and I had nothing lined up in terms of an apprenticeship. So I had like on the one hand I was so grateful that I had like my dream grades, but then on the other hand I was like I just feel so lost and confused. I don't even know what I'm doing with my life. Parents are obviously concerned, like, come on, pick something. They weren't too keen on me doing a gap year, but they were open to doing an apprenticeship once I told them about what it involved. But whatever it was, they kind of wanted me to do something that year because they felt that I might just waste a year and maybe just get a job and then never really want to get back into education, which is a valid concern. Um, so I thought, what's going to happen now? Like, I don't know what I'm doing in my life. So I deferred my university entry. So I've got a place for the year after instead. And now I've got a year to do what? Like, just sit at home, work a normal, like, I was like, what do I do? And I was still in the reserve pool for Rolls-Royce at this point. So I sent off my grades to them, not thinking much of it. And like, I was just praying for a miracle, basically. I was like, I need something to happen. Like, the only way I could see myself getting an apprenticeship was if I got picked from the reserve pool. But to me, that seemed like such a long shot because I knew like they only took like less than 10 apprentices like for that particular scheme because it was a finance one. So it was a bit more niche and more competitive. And I thought, like, what are the odds of it happening? And but I kid you not, I still get like goosebumps thinking about it. Like around 2 weeks after, I got a phone call saying that someone missed their grades and I was one of their first backups. Am I still interested in joining? It'd be very quick because I was literally meant to start like within a month. But if I could get all the paperwork signed, basically an offer's on the table. And I was like, yes. I like at first I couldn't believe it was happening. And then I was like, yes. I am, this is my lifeline. And again, I just took that opportunity, and that is basically my journey onto an apprenticeship. So to give a bit of context for the listeners, so I did a level 7 management accounting apprenticeship at Rolls-Royce. So it was a 4.5 year apprenticeship, and level 7 is equivalent to a master's degree. So for accounting, it's a qualification that makes you an accountant. So I did a qualification called CIMA. So I qualified as a chartered management accountant because you don't need the accounting degree. But it basically went up to master's degree level, which was the highest one on the table, and it still currently is. There's nothing higher in terms of like the apprenticeship level. So to be getting a master's level education completely paid for at a FTSE 100 company, and it being like a non-accounting industry where you get exposure to like engineering and that, it just felt like such a rare and like exclusive opportunity for me. And I felt like I'd be crazy to say no, so I went for it. I said yes to it, and I was so glad something worked out and that I just got a chance and an opportunity from someone to prove that I can deliver. So that was me getting onto the apprenticeship. So I'll talk about my journey later. So going back to you, Carlo, what was your experience like in terms of getting onto your apprenticeship? Where did you even find out about it, seeing as everyone is still pushing you towards university? And did you apply to university?
Well, I applied for university, and I remember the day I applied, which was Christmas of 2020, around that time. I applied, and it was like, okay, it was the first year of my level 3 course. Level 3s are 2 years. And I was like, do I want to do this? It was like £25 at the time. And that was a lot of money to me then. Still a lot of money to me now. And I was like, do I do it? Do I don't? Didn't have Chat GPT back then, so I had to fill it in all myself, right? So it was quite difficult for me, and I struggle with little tasks like that. I'm really good at big tasks, right? Tell me to run a marathon, I'll go do it. Tell me to like run out the road, I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. No way, too easy. And yeah, it was difficult. Says I never actually knew anyone that went to university where I grew up, around around Ilford, near Ganshill, near Hainault. Yeah, I knew no one who went to university. You're lucky to get a job where I was from. And I thought, wow, a job. That's really good. And quite opposite me and Haider, because yeah, I applied to university. I got student of the year, so all my offers got accepted. I got like a really good referral, even though they was going to kick me out of college the year before because I never really turn up, just being a teenager. But they looked after me, and I am where I am today. I've made loads of mistakes, and it was really weird because I got accepted into King's College London, and I was like, oh, that's a proper university. I was like, I don't want to go because being in debt petrified me. I personally grew up with a grandmother who gambled a lot, and being in debt and having a bill over my head, it shook me to my core, petrified me. I was like, nope, not doing that. Couldn't get a scholarship. I didn't know how they work, but you think scholarships, so that must be a thing. No, doesn't work that way. And I was like, well, what am I going to do? Because I kind of left college around start of June. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, at the time, I was doing like a building slash landscaping job. I was like doing a business admin as well for the same company. I was doing like personal training on the side. And before that, I was an NHS volunteer during COVID. I done over 400 hours worth of experience in about 7, 8 months. Done that all the time. Spoke to loads of really cute old guys and ladies. It's really lovely. And yeah, then I was an assistant manager at a charity shop. Like, just learnt loads of selling, helped run the shop. So I knew I liked working. I knew I liked doing something because I was like sitting down, education bored me. I didn't want to go to uni. I had nothing lined up, and I was like, well, I'm probably gonna have to do something with IT or do something like plumbing. I thought, because I knew two guys at the time who were like making really good money as like basically self-employed plumbers, and I was like, yeah, well, I could do that. It's not that difficult. Like, I can learn it all. I was like, well, no, and it was just really difficult. Everything was so hard, and then I was like, well, what can I do? So I was googling, and I looked at Amazon apprenticeships recently because I was like, oh, Jeff Bezos, he seems the guy. Applied for Amazon, and yeah, I got to the video interview stage and recorded my whole interview and realised that the mic weren't working when it was done after. So they just kind of declined me, and it really hurt me because, you know, IT genius, by the way, triple A star, didn't click unmute the whole time. Yeah, really embarrassing. Don't want to live that one. But listen, Bezos didn't get me. NatWest did. So I applied to NatWest and got some help for a charity called LCSB. What they pretty much did was basically say, hey, pass our tests for the company. They work hand in hand with each other. It's all the NatWest curriculum stuff. They help kids from underprivileged areas, such as myself, get into jobs by teaching them how to do an interview. It didn't really help me. I already knew how an interview worked. I'm incredibly streetwise. I knew everything that I needed to know, and I just got put in front of the interviewer, this guy called Steve. I won't say his last name. And I was originally going to do data analytics. I thought, well, I'll do IT, right? Data analytics, something I'll do. And yeah, got to the interview about like 12. This was over Zoom, by the way, right? And we just start chatting about stuff. Like, well, in the interview, he asked me like some company specific things, like scenarios, do my values align with theirs, yada yada. Then it gets to the point about, well, you know, in portfolio management and all these things work. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know a lot about portfolio management because I'm not really in the property and that, and I've not really worked on projects that much. And he was like, oh, you must have learned that in your degree. And I'm like, huh, that's funny. I didn't do a degree. He's like, what? I thought you was a grad, going to a grad job. I'm like, no, I'm doing data analytics, a degree apprenticeship. And he's like, no. because my actual name's Charles. My name's Charles Weaver, but everyone calls me Carlo because I'm half Italian, and they must have got Charles someone else mixed up, because he was like, well, what's a degree apprenticeship? So my interview now turned into why I should get this job that doesn't exist, to how to pitch an idea to someone who is very senior, earns a six-figure salary, and is in a very high portfolio management decision for the whole of the technology in the investment bank, and convince him somehow what the scheme is and how I could be of use to him. And I somehow did. I don't know how. Maybe I got the gift of the gab, and it was quite funny because it was a 2-hour call. And near the end of the call, the business strategy manager was got in. Can't say his name, unfortunately. We'll call him John. John comes in and it's like, oh, who's this, Steve? And talks to me. He's like, wow, you should, degree apprenticeships. He knew about them. And he was like, well, you can do like business strategy and portfolio management. And I'm like, great, I ain't got a clue about both. But I blagged my way in, and I started the job. Didn't do data analytics. I thought I'm in IT. I'd been in a back office role, and then boom, they put me in a front office role in technology. And it was dealing with the bank's, say, £800 million portfolio of projects. And the business strategy was talking to the guy who's the CI, which is the Chief Information Officer, and was like, oh, this is what we should do to align our strategy with the tech. And I learned all of that for a year and a bit. Then I became a software developer, which is another funny story because, again, complete luck of how I became a software developer, because I didn't enjoy. I enjoyed my apprenticeship, and I still do, but what I didn't enjoy was I went from basically a college of doing some good deeds to C-suite people who are looking after very important assets and who are busy. And my days turned from having some work to 9 hours worth of meetings for a year. And I was like, I cannot do this. My brain cannot function. I love talking, hence why I'm on a podcast. And it was really difficult. So I was like, okay, what can I do? I said, I like coding. I'm not very good at it. I knew I definitely wasn't very good at it when I got this job. And what can I do? I said, so we're talking about late 2022. And I was like, I could set a volunteering day up. Why don't I set a volunteering day up? Because that way I can invite all the C-suite and D-suite people from the bank, get them to a nice place, have a nice pub location right after the volunteering event. Spoke to the people around the pub, got a nice little free drinks and food going after, so they all got there, and I just basically helped set the event up, and spoke to someone who is basically the head of technology trading, and this is my new boss, who I didn't know till a few months later, and we just got on like a house on fire. And he was like, well, you should become a developer. And I'm like, well, I don't have any resource costs, because a lot of people don't know that degree apprentices get their money from a levy. And the levy is basically what funds you, or partially you. And that way you're not associated to a project cost, which means that you have a very unlikely chance of being made redundant if the project you're working on goes bust, or it finishes early, which is equally as good as it is bad. So after talking to him and explaining to his boss, who's the head of technology in the whole bank, how things work about degree apprenticeships, they gave me a chance and just learn about, I thought, what the business wants. And you actually sit down with an investment trader who works on a sales desk or the Eurogov desk, or the gilts desk. There's so many different desks, and you learn like, wow, this is really interesting, and these people are really impatient, and I need to find a way that I can communicate with them and become a developer. So I've been doing that for about 7 months, and as a degree apprentice, I've never felt like a degree apprentice. I've never felt like an apprentice. NatWest have been really good. They've never made me feel like I make the teas and the coffees. They put me straight on the club sandwiches, is what they done. So it's been a wild ride. I'm halfway through my apprenticeship. I don't like doing my degree, and I'm very open about it, for the reason that I've never gotten traditional education, but I'm very blessed to have an amazing opportunity to get a degree debt-free, and I'm doing my mother and my grandmother very proud. I'm going to be the first person in my family to achieve a degree or any qualification, which is really good. So that's my little spiel
Yeah.
of what I'm doing.
And
And yeah.
what I love about that is that um, the beauty of doing an apprenticeship is that you do actually get a lot more autonomy to
Yeah.
express like where you'd like to work and things like that. Some again, it can vary based on companies, which is where like it might be good to do a bit of research. But
Mm.
generally speaking, like it's great to see how you're able to create your own look as an
Yeah.
apprentice. Because to me, the way I see it is like with one CV, as in for the application for a degree apprentice, you kind of get a free pass to like anywhere in the organization if you are able to express why you really want to work there and the value you can add. So it sounds great in your instance that you were able to really like drive your career, although it felt like look at the time of like, how
It
did I land
does.
this, how did I land
Yeah.
that kind of thing. But you're in the driving seat of your own career, and you're getting out of the apprenticeship what you want to learn, right? And like in terms of my own experience, it was a bit more structured, but again, I had that autonomy to express where I wanted to work. So for example, my apprenticeship was 4.5 years long. We had 12-month rotations around different parts of the business. So the very first rotation we were placed into, but then all the other rotations after, we got like a preference where we'd like to work. So we could put like a first, second, or third choice, and they try and allocate it as best as they could to make sure that we get, like a broad amount of experience across our overall apprenticeship. So my first placement actually was in VAT, so like a very specific part of tax. So like to go from like A levels to just tax, like it was very interesting. But I had a really supportive manager, and they, again, I never felt like I was an apprentice. I got treated like an equal from day
Mm.
one, which I really liked, because I feel like in school sometimes you're sort of looked as like potentially irresponsible. You're not really treated like an adult sometimes.
Mm.
Sixth form was a bit different. I felt like you had that young professional vibe, but especially like being in school, like in terms of secondary school, you always felt like you were being talked down to rather than talked to. And what I really liked about being an apprentice is you were always talked to, and that whole stereotype of like you were never looked down on, or you weren't seen as, like you said, someone who makes the teas and the coffee. So I was treated as an equal from day one. If anything, I felt like they were more impressed because I was so
Mm.
young and I was able to like keep up with like people a lot older than me in terms of workload and stuff. So that was my first placement. And then yeah, over the course of my sort of 4.5 year apprenticeship, I'd worked in tax, I'd worked in um, accounts receivable, which is basically like all the incoming money into the business in terms of sales. So I was doing like a lot of invoicing using like technology systems and seeing how that works and how that links to like how Rolls-Royce operate in terms of sales of like aeroplane. It was very interesting because you're basically like doing all the finances for a lot of like civil aerospace stuff. And like where else would you be able to combine like aerospace engineering and finance and get like an education paid for? And like, do you know what I mean? Like it was such a, to me, it just felt like such a cool and exclusive opportunity. And I felt, although sometimes you can feel like you're missing out on the traditional university experience, you are given something very unique that like not many people will experience other than the people on your apprenticeship usually. But even then, because a lot of us were across different teams,
Mm.
even being on the same apprenticeship, our experiences after it were different because we'd done different placements. So on paper, we'd done the same scheme, but our experience was still quite different because we'd shaped it how we wanted to, and we went into areas that interested us. So I'd worked in tax, I'd worked in accounts receivable, I did like a stint in like a government claims team, so working with like government funds and things like that, grants. I got a really cool opportunity to be the first apprentice, similar to yourself. Like there were areas where they never had
Mm.
apprentices, but because they could see the potential in people and you could express an interest, I wanted to go somewhere where I'd get access to like really senior management and get a bit of insight in terms of like C-suite as well. So group finance was a placement I did where I basically my team was reporting into the CFO, and like they'd never had an apprentice there. It was always graduates in the past. So to be an apprentice and the first apprentice in that team felt like a huge sort of like privilege as well, because I'm getting really unique insight that, let's face it, a teenager or like someone in their early 20s would never get access to.
Not even and I think this is also quite a benefit of an apprenticeship or degree apprenticeship specifically compared to a graduate program. There can be less structure that can be used to your advantage. I know for a fact that certain graduates wouldn't be allowed into the role I'm doing because you would need so much experience and you would need to be set a certain cost for a project resource and you'd expect to know so much. So me, it's like, here, you go play with that. You'll be fun. It will be okay. And they do the same, and then you can kind of grow and prosper from that. Of
Mm.
course, there's an element of risk to that, right? Having too much freedom can be a detriment to some people, and the bridge between education and an apprenticeship is massive because you think, well, you go to university, that's a completely different topic. We're not covering that here because it will turn into a 4-hour podcast if we
Yeah.
cover the education side of the apprenticeship.
Yeah.
But I think one thing we should do and talk about, especially for the listeners, is why should parents put their child into a degree apprenticeship instead of just going to university? What would you say is the best things, top of your head?
So to me, the market's only getting more competitive when it comes to graduates, right? Because you always have to look at the context. At some point in time, very few people went to university, and because the supply of graduates was scarce, there was a lot of demand for them in terms of the jobs that they'd attract. But now we've come to the other side of the pendulum, where like the supply is abundant. Literally everyone seems to have a degree these days. Obviously, you can dispute, the quality of the degrees and the prestige based on like where they studied, but in terms of just having the degree, a lot of people have a degree, so they're in that sort of graduate boat. So it's like, what will you do to stand out? I feel like with anything in life, you need to stand out. And I feel like now a degree apprenticeship is like the perfect opportunity for a young person to stand out because A, you've got experience at a young age. B, you're getting paid a salary from day one, which is very nice. Like from personal experience, going from like £50 in your bank account to suddenly having thousands was like, whoa, this is not a scam. Like this is very real money. Like with that first paycheck is always like a very like life-changing moment, I think, as an apprentice, because especially when you come from like a lower socioeconomic background where you literally have to graft to make even the smallest bit of money, to go into like, you're getting paid thousands, like just what seemed to me like I'm just learning and having a lot of fun.
And adding to that again, like, can't stress enough the feeling of waking up at 6, going to a building site in the rain all day long, coming home making £80 after a 10-12 hour shift, and that's hard work, logging stuff all day long, and then getting paid a £2,000 salary at 19 years old, and what you start on is like, okay, this is good. And it's not just about the salary. I think it's about the benefits, the fact that you can take holidays. Because as a kid, you think, this person works, I don't get no time off. No, you get a set amount of holidays, and you can use those, and you can get other things, like certain companies do dental, certain ones do healthcare, but you don't think that. And you don't think that not because you're ignorant, it's because you're uneducated. Simply, that's why it is.
So going back to the original question of why, what would I tell a parent, for example? I would say, listen, you're getting your child is getting practical work experience, especially if it's with a really reputable companies that basically all the Oxford or Cambridge graduates would want to work at anyway. So to me, it was like, okay, why don't I just get there first? It's just less competition. Yes, apprenticeships, especially degree apprenticeships, are super competitive, but in my mind, that competition was still a fraction of the actual competition of being in the graduate market, where it was even more cutthroat. So in my opinion, it was less competitive in that sense, but in isolation competitive. So you get a head start, you get to kickstart your career early. Because you're an apprentice, you get to explore a lot more. You're given, to me, it's like the perfect transition into adulthood, especially if you do it as a teenager. For me, it was like it's like a sandpit to like navigate, like a bridge between school and the world of work. Because I've spoken to so many of my friends who are graduates who feel like the jump is just too much. Like it's a culture shock to go from like full-time university to then just full-time work, and they're like, oh, this is so hard, and it's like very hard to juggle that. Whereas I feel like an apprenticeship is that perfect blend of you transition so that when you get into a job after, it doesn't feel like this really big scary thing. It's like you've been preparing for it all along, and you've had that 50-50 split of learning and working, and now you're working, sort of thing. So the salary, the experience, the having like a top company on your CV, and the fact that you can get qualified at a much younger age with regards to some careers, and it almost kind of guarantees you getting to the career you want. Because how many people have a career in mind, but then because of the competition, they have to take all these detours after university? Whereas I feel like with an apprenticeship, the beauty is like you're getting the position that you want. So for example, I wanted to become a chartered accountant. I'm getting that on the scheme. There's no like in between. Nothing's going to disrupt that. I just need to finish the apprenticeship and I'll get there. Whereas for other people, they have this ambition to want to go into a particular career, do a degree, and then they find they can't get into it. So they have to take all these, other routes to get there, and it can take them longer, cost them more money, it's more stressful. So that's the beauty of an apprenticeship. You you get a jump start, you get what you want straight away, as long as you're willing to work hard. Yes, it can be challenging. It's not the easier route. Again, going back to the stereotype of, yeah, apprenticeships are like super easy. No, it's real work, but at the same time you get a lot of structured support as well, which is the beauty of it, in my
And
opinion.
I would say the key thing about the money as well was that for me personally, and I'm sure for many of those listening, having that paycheck come in and knowing that like you can actually not go to a food bank and eat food and maybe get your hair cut and do things like that for yourself is nice. And no, that's all we have to say. I just want to say thank you very much, guys, for watching. Question for the audience, which is my turn, is what are you currently doing now education wise? And are you doing an apprenticeship? If yes, what one? And if no, would you do one?
I'd love to hear about if your opinion around an apprenticeship has changed based on our conversation. And again, there's so much we can talk about in terms of our own journeys that like we probably wouldn't be able to fit it into this one episode. Probably need a whole series, to be honest, but feel free to leave your questions that you have specifically about our journeys based on what you've heard, and we'd love to get more content out there to help other people get onto these amazing apprenticeships, especially ones who come from underprivileged backgrounds like us, right? It's all about leveling the playing field and giving young people access to opportunities that they might struggle to get otherwise.
Thanks for watching the Apprentago podcast. New episodes will be available every Friday at 5 p.m. GMT. If you enjoyed, then please leave a like and make sure to rate us 5 stars. It's been your host Carlo. Take care.